to make modern, melodic, cinematic sounding beats, this is the video for you. What you just heard was a beat in the style of Don Toliver's new album, Octane. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I made it from scratch. We're going to go step by step from melody to texture to drum bounce and all the small production details most tutorials skip. So your beats hit harder and feel more cinematic. No fluff, just practical sound choices and techniques you can use right away. Let's get straight into it. So Don Toliver's production usually has that kind of R&B influence, but also have those elements from Travis Scott's kind of style. So those heavy synth basses, synthetic leads, kind of dreamy, vibey pads. So to lay the foundation, we can start with some simple chords. I've started with a simple triad progression with some additional notes on top. The way I go about creating Don Toliver beats would be to start with a bass line. And this bass line sounds super familiar in the context of Don Toliver. And so to build this chord progression, you can start with these simple bass notes here, and then you can build some triads. So we've got a B minor triad, and then we're going to add a C major triad. This chord just adds that kind of tension because the bass notes are so close together. And then we might just add a tension note in there and then invert that up and then do the same here. And then just finally add a couple of notes at the end like here, just drag that over. And that's pretty much the chord progression. And that pretty much repeats over. In terms of sound selection, I definitely lean on some kind of pads or keys from Analog Labs. Then once we have that chord progression in place, we can copy that over and clone it a couple times, maybe add in some textured layers in there just to give a bit more width. And we can stack another synthetic instrument from Analog Labs. And then just to get a little bit of that gritty texture, I'd grab a really interesting pedal kind of textured preset. Anything with kind of gritty texture or some interesting artifacts will really add a load of character to the beat. I've gone with a pedal preset from Keyon here, which I think works really nicely. In terms of processing, it kind of depends on what the instrument is, but if you're using any instrument from Analog Labs, they usually have some quite nice effects already built into them. So all I did was add a spreader to that first chord progression. I left the others dry and then just messed around with the stereo separation a little bit just to kind of give as much width as possible. So once we have that clone progression, we want to bring an interesting kind of leading element into the beat. So the main instruments in Octane that do this would either be a lead or maybe some kind of electric guitar. So to get that cinematic feel, I've grabbed a lead guitar preset from Analog Labs and I played in a simple progression here. And because that sounded a little bit dry, I wanted a little bit more reverb and maybe some kind of interesting granular effect. And so to pull some of that texture through, I added a grain runner from Portal, and that just added more of a reverb tail and made it way more interesting and less like it was obviously played in by a keyboard. So I'll show you it before and after. I definitely wouldn't be a Don Toliver Octane beat without a few different interesting leads. And so again, pretty simple. It's just a kind of brass lead preset, and then we've got a simple progression here. And all we're doing is playing along with the rhythm, just trying to fill some of those pockets. You can kind of compose these kind of leads progressions in many different ways, but I would suggest that sometimes just plugging in a MIDI keyboard and just kind of playing around, sometimes you just get the best results. Clicking in melodies is great, but sometimes when you just get a MIDI keyboard and you just play along, sometimes you just come up with something that you would never come up with if you were to click it in. And I've got a second lead here, which is again super subtle, but it's just adding a little bit more flavor. And sometimes I just like to add this kind of interesting note starter here, and little texture things like that just add up to the bigger picture, but sometimes it just adds way more character than if it was just quantized or exactly on grid. And I did add a third lead here for the purposes of using in the verse or maybe the bridge. Just some kind of weird, interesting ear candy. Just really adds to that Don Toliver spacey, atmospheric, outer worldly kind of vibe. And the final melodic element I added was a nice, rich bass for that low end. Again, just an Analog Labs low end bass. And for the most part, just following the root notes. A lot of time in Octane and a lot of other Don Toliver beats, you hear those really interesting synthetic basses that go up and down an octave. It really adds movement to the low end, but really helps to build that kind of futuristic feel that we're going for. So now we've got all the melodic elements in place, it's time to look at the drums. So in Don Toliver's album Octane, you hear a lot of kind of standard trap sounds. Crisp snares and hi-hats, open hats, hard-hitting 808s and synth basses. To be honest, there's nothing groundbreaking about the drums on Octane, but what you can see is they're always punchy and always hit and they're crisp. So to achieve that, we've got some kind of standard trap sounds. And so to lay the foundations of the rhythm, we can lay down a simple hi-hat and a snare. And again, it's pretty much just two-step hi-hats with some breaks and some rolls dotted here and there. I've dropped some here and there just to add a little bit to the rhythm. And on top of this, we're going to add a few different snares. And then finally, we've got two 808s and then another bass coming in, and they kind of alternate and bounce between each other. The most interesting part is with this bass one shot, I essentially just filled in the pockets where the 808 wasn't hitting, and also added some rolls and some hard stops just to add to the bounce. Again, it's just following the rhythm with the drums, but I'm adding a lot of movement and bounce to that low end. When you're trying to achieve this kind of sound, one important thing you have to do is make sure that all your low end sounds have this envelope. Essentially, all of these are down to 0 and just the holder is up to 100. And make sure you click cut itself, because you don't want things rolling into each other. You want that kind of hard stop so things aren't bleeding and it sounds clean and crisp. And so those are all the main sounds in the beat. So now we want to make sure we're arranging it in the right way for the artist to jump on. So in terms of the arrangement, most songs on Don Toliver's album are about 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes long. They want high replay value and leave you wanting more. So I matched that theme with my beat. Essentially, we've got an intro here, chorus, a verse section, bridge, back into a chorus, and then an outro. So essentially, we're just looking for things to keep evolving as the beat goes on. So we can start with the chord progressions, with the guitar lead and the bass. And the second part of the intro, we introduce this lead. And then just before that chorus hits, we've got a little fill, just to add a little bit more punch. So I'm just getting creative and just stacking a few different elements can just really help a beat hit way harder. And then to keep the second part of the chorus interesting, we introduce that lead that we teased at the start. Then we've got another lead coming in, and then we've added a break. And then once the verse hits, we've got the third iteration of the chords, introducing that third synth patch, a bit of ear candy, and then we've got some drums. The key thing I did here was actually add another 808 and a slightly different 808 pattern. Also hear that guitar lead coming in again, but what I did was made it unique and I pitched that down an octave. It's again familiar, but you can tell it's slightly different from the chorus. And then we come over to the bridge here, which is pretty much the same as the intro. We introduce the bass with a lead and then just that textured pad playing by itself. guys for watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to not miss any more breakdowns like these. If you want to learn why UK artist Central C's beats are taken in worldwide, make sure to click the video here. I'll see you all in the next one.